So you're heading out to the garage and going for a ride on your motorcycle. Will you wear protective gear or not? If so, what type of gear? If no gear, why not any gear? Well, there was an interesting focus group conducted on riders' choice of gear and what influenced those choices. Some of these results were very surprising to me, and this week on MCrider we'll talk about it. Hey, my name's Kevin, and I release a weekly video here on MCrider focused on road skills or road strategy to help you become a better rider. Become a member of MCrider and get access to even more tools to help you stay sharp and develop your skills on two wheels. The purpose of this focus group was to determine riders' attitudes towards using high-visibility riding gear. But there were some very interesting details that came out of it, and if you'd like to see the complete study, I'll have a link to download that PDF at mcrider.com/gear study, so you can go there and find the link to the complete study. Now, the study was conducted with riders in California, Michigan, Texas, and Maryland, and was offered to riders who rode cruisers, touring bikes, sport bikes, and scooters. So they segregated riders into 4 different categories, and they attempted to hit a large geographical segment of the country and different types of motorcycles. So here are some of the things that I found of particular interest from the study. The number one factor in determining gear choice was not safety, it was weather. If it was too hot, riders simply leave the protective gear at home. It was as simple as that. Now, I've always agreed with the opinion that sweat's a whole lot easier to wash from my clothes than blood is, so I always have a level of protection on. My everyday riding gear is a full-face helmet, jacket, gloves, over-the-ankle shoes. On longer trips or all day on the motorcycle, I'll add some riding pants to that. With that set of gear as my base level of protective gear, I have some choices when it comes to the weather. If I'm on the street, so I'm not practicing on a parking lot, I'm always wearing a full-face helmet regardless of the temperature. Now, occasionally when I'm practicing, I'll wear a shell helmet if I'm not going to be getting up to speed, but I wear a full-face helmet to and from that practice range. I believe the helmet's the most protective and the most important piece of protective gear that a rider can wear. And when it comes to jacket choices, if it's hot, I wear a vented textile riding jacket. If it's really hot, I add cycle chillers and circulate ice-cold water through the vest. It's really an amazing option whenever it gets really hot out there, and I've got a complete video on that if you're interested. If it's cold, I have a heavier weight jacket that's large enough to add layers underneath it, and if it's really cold, I can add heated gear to that mix. The same with choices for gloves and over-the-ankle shoes, lighter, more breathable for warmer weather, heavier, more insulated for the cold. I can also turn on the heated grips on both of my touring bikes that I've got right now. But what I don't want to do is allow the weather to determine my protection in a crash. In my opinion, adapt the gear to the weather and not the level of protection. So back to that study. Of the types of motorcycles ridden, remember the survey was conducted with riders of sport bikes, touring bikes, cruisers, and scooters. Which of these types of riders are most likely to always wear a helmet? Well, this part didn't really surprise me. It was sport bike riders. In fact, the study found that 87% of sport bike riders said they always wear a helmet. But who is the least likely to always wear a helmet? Now, this one surprised me, and it wasn't really even close in the study. It's my touring riders. It's guys like me. Only 58% of you stated you always wear a helmet, while 77% of cruiser riders said they did, and 71% of scooter riders always wear a helmet. But only 58% of touring riders said they always wear a helmet. That's a lot of cold wing guys out there riding around in a ball cap, and maybe that huge fairing and giant windscreen helps keep that hat from blowing off your head, so you just roll with it. I don't know. But I really found that surprising. And I think that most people would say that it was probably the cruiser guys. If you had to guess, if I could hear your guess, you'd probably say it was the cruiser guys with no helmet. But I guess that's not correct, at least according to this study. It's all of us riders on the motorcycle equivalent to a lazy boy recliner out there that's throwing caution to the wind. Overall, though, cruiser riders preferred wearing minimal gear, and they preferred leather if they were wearing protective gear at all. Sport bike riders tended to wear the most protection, including a full-face helmet, and they wore either leather or textile protective gear. And then when you get to the touring guys, man, I don't know what we think anymore. We were all over the map. Some wore little to no gear while others were fully suited up, and the result tended to cluster towards the extremes. So they were either wearing gear or they weren't wearing gear. There wasn't very many people in the middle on it. And the survey didn't include much on the scooter riders, but they did find that most wear a helmet and rarely any other protective gear, which I find kind of interesting that scooter riders are going to wear a helmet but no other protective gear. In fact, when I used to work for the major airlines, I was leaving work one day and I had all my gear, had my jacket and gloves with me, helmet in hand. I was walking out to my motorcycle. Somebody walked over and said, "Oh, man, I got a funny story for you." And I said, "Hey, what's that?" They said, "You know that guy that rides a scooter?" And I said, "Yeah, I know him. He parks out there in the motorcycle parking by me." They said, "Well, he was walking out the other day and he had all this gear with him." And I was laughing. I said, "Don't you ride a scooter?" And I said, "Well, last time I checked, the scooter riders are out there with the big SUVs just like I am. So I don't blame him for having all that gear on." And that was the last time she came over to tell me a funny story about riding a motorcycle, because I fully agree with that scooter rider. You want to be protected out there as well. But I guess that's kind of the stereotype for a reason, at least for scooter riders, and that most say that they only wear a helmet and little other protective gear. But this brings up an interesting point, that motorcycles are supposed to be an expression of independence. At least that's the stereotype built around motorcycling, is of an independent rider, someone who doesn't care what other people think, is willing to take some risk to enjoy the open road. And yet when it comes to gear selection, for the most part, we fall into party lines. Sport bike riders wear a lot of gear because they picture themselves looking like this. Cruiser riders wear leather because they picture themselves as this. And us touring riders, man, I don't know what to think anymore. I guess this is us, but I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. We need to change the perception of riding gear from being a fashion statement to one of level of protection. I'm all for riders choosing for themselves their level of protection, but don't let the motorcycle you ride or the people you ride with make those choices for you. Be that independent rider that you wanted to be when you started riding. Look at studies for yourself, and you'll see that riding with protective gear makes sense. But ultimately, you have to make that decision. Don't let your riding buddies make it for you and feel pressured into how much or how little protective gear or the type of gear that you wear when you ride. Now, you want to see my helmet that I ride when I'm on the Gold Wing is this. Full face helmet. When I'm on the BMW, I'm riding this. I used to own a Road King, which is a really cool looking Harley cruiser. And when I was on the Road King, let's see, what did I do with that helmet? Oh yeah, there it is. I wore this. Full face helmet. Every time I get out on the street, I wear a full face helmet. That's the choice I've made for me because I feel like it's the most protective, and I feel like this is the most important piece of protective gear that you can wear. The others are more likely to protect you from injury. This is very likely to protect you from brain injury or death. So I always have a full face helmet on when I'm out on the street. It's an important piece of gear. So as I said earlier, I have some choices when it comes to protective gear, and having a few different options of gear is not cheap, but in the end, that investment is worth it to me. I think it's short-sighted to let fashion dictate your level of protection, and if you're doing that, take some time to evaluate your choices in gear and pick something that you're comfortable with and something that's going to protect you out on the road. Don't forget you can go to mcrider.com/gear study. You can download that complete PDF of this study and see what riders' opinions are on riding with high-vis gear, That's something I believe in as well. I think it's one more option that keeps us safer and increases my level of protection just a little bit by allowing someone to give them a better chance of seeing me if they're paying attention. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that study, so I hope you'll go out to mcrider.com/gear study and you'll download that and read through it. Till next week, guys, it's Ken with MC Rider, and I'll see you on the road.